Well, good evening and welcome to the National Institute of Integrative Medicine, where tonight we are broadcasting the third webinar in our special coronavirus series. Over the last few weeks, our clinical panelists have discussed developments in the transmission, science, treatment, and new developments of the coronavirus. We have also considered the consequence of necessary physical distancing on our mental health, with interesting insights shared about our unknowing capacity for resilience and optimism. Whilst we've all had our livelihoods affected in one way or another, in many respects, the way in which we have seemingly and successfully suppressed the curve has provided an interesting lesson for all of us. Indeed, we have learned that our health and that of those around us is truly our wealth. So in light of this, NIIM is excited to have psychiatrist Dr. Chris Corcos, Light Warrior Chairman and former Swiss CEO Radek Sali, and Kathleen Quealy from Quealy Vineyards tonight to share their insights on the ways in which we can handle the unique stresses placed on our businesses, our families, our livelihoods, and of course, our health. We encourage you to ask questions this evening, as we will also consider the transition out of a COVID-19 world to a new normal. Of course, important work like this webinar tonight at NIIM would not be possible without the generous support of our community. If you are able to make a small contribution this evening, you can do so by going to our website. So without further ado, to all of our panel, there's no doubt that the coronavirus has changed the way in which we work, we manage people, and we run our businesses overnight. Perhaps all the panel can tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you've all recently had to handle and some of the unique ways you've managed them. Radek, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So this is the most extraordinary thing we've seen in our lifetime, and you speak to anyone of any age, they reflect the same views. The one thing I would say that's been, I suppose, a little comforting throughout all the uncomfort is that we're all in the same position. So we're all going through this. And I remember times in businesses past where things aren't going well and you're the only business not going well. And that felt more difficult as an individual, but as a collective, we're dealing with this issue. So for me, it's been about communication and regular communication and checking in with people in a group format, individual format, and utilising technology like never before. So I think that fundamentally, throughout any challenging time, we need to help each other, support each other, and it's really been a real focus on constructive, positive language to get us through what is really challenging and trying circumstance.
Kathleen, Chris, I'm sure you've got some interesting insights too.
After you, Chris.
Well, thanks, Sali. I agree with what you said, Radek. I'm a sole practitioner, a psychiatrist, so I don't actually have people working under me, but I have staff in the clinics that we need to look after. The funny thing is that many of the folks I see who are troubled by mental health problems seem to be weathering the changes, the enforced changes, the physical isolation, physical distancing, and restrictions of movement really quite well. And for quite a few people that I see, they're more relaxed, they're more at ease. And it's the strangest thing. I've had the feeling that it's like some sort of pressure has been taken off them. And I'm sure it's, not the case for everyone, but when you think about it, going out and visiting people, social obligations, whether you hug somebody or shake their hand or not, all that can constitute a stress to some people who may be more vulnerable. And so now it's all gone, and it's not their doing, it's mandated by government. Mm-hmm. And so it's not all bad, and I think there are many opportunities here for folks to kind of regroup in a way and reorganize themselves and their lives and get clearer on what's really important. So it's not all too bad from my point of view.
Kathleen, did you want to add anything as to how you've managed some of the unique challenges that have come over the last little while?
I think that we're really an agricultural business and with a winery. And I think there was that real contrast between you couldn't go home, you all had to stay at work because you have to bring in the harvest and you have to make the wine. So you had to communicate very well to everyone who worked for you. You had to get a lot of assurance that everybody was staying isolated, and the only place there were no triangles, just a straight line, home, back, home, back. We knew we had to be like that for 3 weeks, and we spent a lot of time talking to the people who work with us to do that. We had and you had to very quickly become innovative, even in something as traditional as picking grapes. And we certainly experienced that in our vineyards. And it's we had a situation where really for 30 years we've had, and if you go to most vineyards, you'll have 20 people in a row picking grapes, throwing the crates over to the next row, tractor driving up and down. And we just thought, well, we can't do that. People can't be touching all these buckets. So we are very fortunate. We have an Alsatian vineyard manager, and he reintroduced his native format of picking grapes, and we had very large crates dropped every 200 metres, and everybody had 1 bucket for the day. We changed how we worked the very first day of harvest, which was in the middle of March, really the beginning of social isolation or human isolation, human distance.
I mean, you're speaking to themes of resilience and persistence, which we'll get to a little later tonight. But Radek, if I just come back to you for a minute, you've always believed that people should be at the centre of any business strategy and outcome. I'm one of the fortunate people that have lived that with you, having worked with you. You lead and are a part of well-connected teams who may be working from home at the moment, like a lot of our audience. How do you stay involved and engaged and present for your team at a time when we all do have to socially distance? And what do you do to stay productive and focused amongst changing circumstances?
So maybe I'll start with my circle of influence, so the things I can control. And so things that I've done is I've had an extra focus on my health, extra focus on the diet I'm consuming, extra focus on exercise, so training for at least an hour a day, getting in and doing meditative training as well through yoga, and then meditating once to twice per day. And these are all the controllables. And I did find myself initially reading the news, waking up to checking the death count, checking how many people had got the virus. And I noticed how much it was affecting me, how much anxiety it was creating. So I put in steps to regulate the amount of news I do consume, because it can become all consuming. And it's one of those things that's out of our control. So I talk with this circle of influence. So being able to ensure that your world is in as good a shape as possible. And then I've had the wonderful privilege of being really present in the mornings and the evenings with family, and just having quality time, not having that time to have to travel somewhere to get to the workplace. So that's been absolutely beautiful. My relationship with my 2-year-old daughter, almost 2-year-old daughter, is just exceptional. So that's one of the things I suppose Chris points to, is that there is room to breathe, and perhaps that's something we'll carry forward as this thing finishes up. And so for our team, I mentioned regular comms, and those comms being tailored to the various people that we work with. You know, everyone comes from different backgrounds, have different settings at home, and you know, our communication has to vary. So it's not good enough just to have a team whip with everyone there in your Zoom conference and having a chat with how things are going. You got to go above and beyond and make sure you're connecting with people one-on-one. And with the extra time, think about people that you've done business with in the past or working with currently, and connect with them, call them out of the blue, family, friends. Just check in. I think it's really important that we show the strength of our community. We also made sure everyone got a health pack from NIIM, and that was really well received. And we've also implemented Zoom sessions for Pilates, personal training, which have been very popular, and everyone's had a lot of banter afterwards as to how well those things have gone. We've done birthdays. There's been 3 birthdays with the team, and we've created a theme around those birthdays. You're going to come with a silly hat or some photos that are kind of close to you that you'd share with the team, just to create kind of a connection. And we've done farewells as well. Some people were finishing up, and that's been really positive in sharing words of encouragement about the time team members have spent with us. And it just comes back to making sure that we're being constructive and positive. And I always just liken life in the office, which a lot of offices unfortunately are this way, where, you know, we go to a personal trainer to keep fit, and if you go to the personal trainer on your first session, they say do 10 push-ups, and the personal trainer says to you, you look really tired, you're not going to get through this halfway through your push-ups. You know, that isn't inspiring. And unfortunately, a lot of the language we choose to use in workplaces is like that. It's demotivating. We need to be encouraging, constructive, and bringing out the best in people around us.
I think that says a lot about the need to connect with people and the importance of those connections at work in delivering outcomes too. Now,
yeah, I love Dad's quote on social distancing. It's not social distancing, it's physical distancing.
Exactly. Yeah. Real missed opportunity to use that at the level. Now, everyone, of course, will notice that this is being hosted on Zoom, and of course, there's an ability to ask questions through the Q&A function. If you do have one, type one in, and we'll get to them a little later on. But of course, many of our audience tonight know that family businesses are at the centre of so many families' lives and livelihoods. Kathleen Quealy Winemakers isn't only a family business, but also a part of a really connected community. Does being a part of a family business help you cope better with the sort of uncertainty we're seeing at the moment?
Well, I recognise that I'm in a unique and fortunate position. I live on a winery, on a vineyard on the Mornington Peninsula, and well, that contributes hugely to my mental health, well-being, very positively every day. Not everyone's in that position. When this crisis began, which really for me was the middle of March, it coincided with the peak time of our year, which is picking grapes and making wine. We're fortunate, we've got 5 kids, and we have some very good in-laws as well. And I can say that everybody pitched in, everybody came and helped, and because of most of our kids live in small flats in Melbourne, they came back and they're living with us at the moment. So I just get them to work all the time, and it's been very helpful for us. And I guess you only get to do that probably once in a lifetime, because, you know, your kids normally have excuses for not being there, and they ended up being there, and we've all had quite a good time. I think we've kept a very flat structure, and perhaps kept our egos out of the way and ignored each other's egos as well. And I think all that's really helped. Everyone's a little bit more equal in a crisis, whether that's members of your family or important people who work for your family business. People's capability trumps their position in the business, and that's what we have experienced.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kathleen. I'm going to, Chris, Kathleen, of course, touched upon the importance of family and connectedness in managing adversity, as did Radek before. So I guess I'm wondering how the pandemic and these necessary lockdowns might change the way we would best look after ourselves. Will those of us that are a little bit more suddenly disposed, highly organised peers be doing anything differently at the moment?
Well, I love what Kathleen said about getting your ego out of the way and allowing other people to have their ego, letting it be. I mean, that's a lifetime's work. And I think looking after yourself in this pandemic is a continuation of the work we all really need to be doing on ourselves anyway, in terms of nutrition, exercise, and managing stressors, how we respond to stressors in life, particularly if we've got vulnerabilities, you know, from pre-existing trauma, which all of us have one way or another. And so what this COVID-19 has done is it's in a way forced people together, and it's sort of raised the temperature a bit. Either you're going to learn to deal with these stressors, or you'll carry on using dysfunctional coping strategies. So there's a huge opportunity here to use some of the tools we've got now. Radek mentioned managing stress states from watching the news. I mean, stress states can come from that, certainly, and from a million things, but we have tools now, like one of the energy psychologies, for managing those stress states. And hopefully most people have the time to simply get online and research them, because they're available online here in Australia. And also we know about basic good nutrition, which helps the brain function well, helps you manage stress and reorient to a more resourceful position in the world and relation to yourself. So all that's here now. And certainly I see part of my job as giving people the directions and the links and the references to that, and showing folks what is available to manage particularly difficult times and get through it and come out the other side stronger, different, a little bit healed and happier. So that's all there. And perhaps this crisis will push more people towards it. I hope so.
Awesome. I mean, Chris, just a follow-up to that answer. At any given moment, we are already handling quite a few colliding stresses, of course, and this has just added another whole nother layer to it.
Exactly.
Many people, exactly, and many people are facing really great novel uncertainty, whether it's the homeschooling or newfound unexpected unemployment, or indeed that lack of interaction with colleagues, which Radek touched upon earlier. I mean, what are some coping mechanisms and strategies we can quickly implement to manage those emotional and physical responses to stress? And how do we change our mindset, not only for the moment now, but for the future too? Just as a follow-up to that previous question.
I think it's a decision that has to arise in the person. It's a sort of waking up. It's a sort of inner action, and either it will arise or it won't. I don't think there's anything we can really do to make it arise in the person. But often if you go into chaos and you're in such a painful, stressed out, chaotic state, it's often out of that state that the person finally gives up. This certainly happened to me. And thinks, okay, I'll use tapping, or okay, you know, I'll talk to some wise, experienced therapist. So once you do get to that state, then it's the three things that Radek talked about: the nutrition, the exercise, and managing stress states. And that is very tightly bound with getting on better, more resourcefully with your family, with your significant others, with your friends, with your workmates. So much stress is secondary to us not really knowing how to relate freely and openly and kindly with other people. So our own wounds get projected onto those people most important to us. And this kind of psychological work, turning to have a little look at what's going on inside in those moments in terms of thoughts and feelings, turning to have a look at that and then processing it in a different way. That's the way permanently through and beyond it. It doesn't take 4.5 years of twice weekly psychoanalytic psychotherapy anymore. So I would suggest people get onto Peter Stapleton's website, PETA Stapleton. She's the professor of psychology at Bond University in Queensland, and she's a world authority on EFT, emotional freedom techniques. There's a lot of free resources on her website. Just have a little look, see if it resonates, and there's nothing to stop you practicing it, trying it out at times when you're in real strife. Also, a couple of other people that I follow that have really helped me are Eckhart Tolle. Am I allowed to show this? Eckhart Tolle and an Australian guru, Sailor Bob Adamson. You can find them all online. They just speak such wisdom about being present, coming back to the present moment, like you were talking about, being in the beauty of nature. But they sort of guide and encourage and cajole you. So start to look for people who can help you get to that state, as well as using the energy psychologies, getting your nutrition right and exercise.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. And of course, those resources will be made available after the webinar and emailed to everyone. Just before I get to the next question, an eagle-eyed viewer has told me that Avni's words of physical distancing have made it to the physical distancing with social interaction has made it to the very top of the country's leadership, with the Prime Minister and CEO of the National Mental Health Commission both now calling it physical distancing with social interaction. So we do have a little bit of influence, and I'm glad people are now actually practicing what they should be preaching. Now, just to change the tack slightly, Radek, Kathleen, whilst many people are focusing on getting through COVID-19, people also have a view to getting back to normal when these restrictions are eased. So I guess our audience is wondering what your thoughts are on taking this chance to look at, taking this opportunity to look at what we can do to use this time to redefine what a new normal looks like when we do transition out of these restrictions.
Ladies first.
Do you mean from a personal point of view or a business point of view?
Well, a bit of both, particularly given, Kathleen, you've got the unique insight of being, owning a family business. So there's really not much of a difference between, my parents are a family business, and of course the personal and the commercial are almost one in the same way.
I think, I must say, I can't even imagine what the new normal will be. I get the feeling at the moment we're on this, and I am being a little bit flippant because I know there are people who are not in my position, but I feel that it's a little bit of a national holiday because, and I am being flippant because I know a lot of people aren't like that, but I know that, people who haven't got a lot of money are getting double with new starts, double what it once was. And I know that people who haven't got proper jobs at the moment because there's simply not enough work are at least getting this fabulous JobKeeper. That's my little bit of politics for the night. The people that I know, and I probably know a lot of positive people, they're doing a lot of walking and gardening and fixing things up. There is a little bit of a national holiday for some people in Australia, and I really hope that for a lot of people, I hope people come back refreshed with new ideas, but it's like the whole country will come back refreshed with new ideas. We're a very fortunate country. We could afford to turn this into a national holiday. I don't think there are any other countries in the world who are doing what we do. And I could be wrong, all the wheels could fall off in a few weeks' time. It could be terrible. All the more reason why we should at least take a little bit of time to get our strategies up and get a little bit rested, and that's all I can see. But
yeah, and
I'm not that wise. I'm a day-by-day kind of person.
and I think, Radek, I'll get to you in a second, but I think a lot of people are looking back on, are now starting to realise that they'll look back on this as a brilliant window that allowed them to spend more time with their families, achieve a little bit more zen, hit the pause button on the journey that is life.
I think the first couple of weeks, from March, middle of March to the middle of April, I think the first 4 weeks were terrible for everybody, because every day something new was happening, and it seemed to be getting deeper and deeper into a disaster. But now there seems to be a little bit of a way out, and now you've still had that rest. I don't know.
Radek?
Yeah, so I agree. We're in a bubble. We're in a holiday bubble, but we're kind of getting sick of the holiday. You can't stay on it forever. Life was meant to be free and have choices connected to it. So what I've personally done is written a list of what we loved about. We've done this with my partner, my wife, and we've written a list of what we've loved about isolation, but also what we're looking forward to. And of course, the list of what we've loved about isolation is longer than what we're looking forward to. So I think it's about selection and creating a new normal that takes into account your personal health and well-being, and coming out of this in a more sustainable fashion. The biggest concern I have, and I agree with the sentiment that Australia has been a lucky country in this. I think it's a little bit unfortunate that people will very quickly forget that we had massive bushfires, actually the biggest fires in the world that had ever occurred in humanity's recording of history, and what action we're going to take as a result of that. I think that we also need to be more aware than ever, and that whilst people most likely on this call are living a privileged lifestyle in some way, form or another, far more privileged than many others that aren't, that are in very difficult circumstance as a result of this, and even deeper difficult circumstance as a result of what we're going through. So, I think it's really important we take a moment to try and work out what we can do to give back to community, and how we can keep that going on, not just as a token effort, as a donation, but giving time and making a difference, and helping those in real need. The other thing, the thing I'm warmed by is our capacity to do something about a crisis. So this has been a big crisis. It won't be the biggest crisis Australia's faced, but the actions we've taken are probably the most severe. So as we face larger crises in the future, I'd expect that Australians will do more and deliver over and above. So things like looking after the planet we live on become an absolute priority rather than a second thought, and our financial well-being put forward as the most important thing before we consider that, the home we live in.
Well, Radek, there's actually, I'm really glad you segued nicely to that, because there's an audience question tonight from Justin, who asked whether, people are now seeing a clear blue sky in the way they haven't seen for a long time. Pollution is clearly down. Is this the line in the sand and tipping point about addressing climate change, and of course the impacts that may have on health, and people power indeed coming to the fore?
I hope that it is not a reaction that causes us to do something about the crises we face. And so that's why it's unfortunate that the timing of this has somewhat dwarfed, in one way or another, what happened with the fires that we saw throughout Australia over the kind of from about October through to February. And hopefully that isn't forgotten. And there needs to be, like we're asking for an independent inquiry as to why this disease this virus has come about. we need to be doing an independent inquiry as to why we're getting fires like we are. Yeah. And we need to do everything we can to ensure that we look after this place that we live in.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that insight, and to Justin as well. We will get to one more audience question later. I'm going to sort of direct a question towards Chris, but open up to the panel in a moment. We're reading a lot of people saying, we're reading and hearing a lot of people saying that with every crisis comes opportunity. Chris, how do we leverage this temporary new normal to commit to better lifestyle choices down the track? I mean, Kathleen, Radek, please intervene, of course, in answering it, but Chris?
Well, I think perhaps just stay awake and pay attention to the good things that are coming into your life that were not there before. When I've gone to buy a takeaway coffee, people are talking. They're keeping physical distance, but they're talking and people are interacting. It's the same when you go to the park. You know, a group of police officers were waiting for their coffee. I have a sense that there is a greater sense of connection, and we're in this together, and communication between people. And one thing is, as Kathleen and Radek have said, keep that up. You know, contact people, family, friends, talk to them if you haven't, and notice how you feel yourself. So that's one thing. And the other thing is other changes that you might make that we've talked about to your lifestyle, and managing stress. Pay attention to how that feels and focus on that. And I'm quite optimistic about the new scenario, the new future as we come out of this, because I think there has been that change that has tended to make people a bit more empathic, and value community a bit more, perhaps.
Kathleen, what's one thing you're doing now that's new because of all of this that you'd like to continue doing in the future, whether it's yourself, in the business, your health, your personal life, with your family?
Oh, one thing that I'm doing now?
Yeah, that you'd like to continue with in the future.
Oh, taking my dog for a walk for 2 hours every day, and that's pretty good. Yeah. But the one thing that I think is that people are spending, and I know in my business, we have all had to spend a lot more time talking to each other. And it began by explaining the situation and how we saw it and how they saw it. And I don't mean we or they, but how we all saw it in different ways, because we all saw the problems in different ways. And I agree. I think there might be a capacity for people to speak to people on a more equal basis, because we all had our own set of fears. And in the end, the fears were all about our health and our life and people around us. So it was a very equal kind of conversation. And so I think it will keep people more at the same pool. And I think that would be a great thing, a great, whatever that is, a great advance.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, Radek, did you want to add anything to that? I mean,
yeah, I just think just some quiet time in many facets. So for introverts to sort of look inwardly, and for a bit of introversion to look inwardly, and then also some outward time where you've got quiet time. It's the same sort of thing, but you're working on something rather than just trying to keep up with the messaging that we get hit with in the workplace, office place, phones, emails, that whole bit. Just having some time in the calendar each day where you can just think strategically and get ahead of things. So we'll carry on that.
Sure. Chris, we are nearing the end of the discussion time, but we do have time for one more audience question from Julie. And Julie asked Chris about perhaps a couple of favourite tips for boosting our natural immunity. Given that there are so many people experiencing extra stress and consequently have really elevated cortisol levels at the moment, what would you advise people like Julie and many others in that same boat at the moment?
Well, that's on the NIIM website. Connect with NIIM. Prof. Sali, the boss, has given us very simple, clear things that we can do to boost immunity. From memory, vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D is critical. And I personally think that's better taken with vitamin A, so I recommend it with cod liver oil. That's got both in. And there are various herbs and supplements which are readily available, will not break the bank, which very definitely boost immunity. Licorice root is another one. Ginger. We have now fresh ginger incorporated in our celery juice every morning. So a few very simple things will boost immunity and will definitely protect against the likelihood of you getting infected with a virus and then the severity of any condition, despite what we're hearing. And I'm sorry we're not hearing any of that from our medical leaders.
Well, and we'll put, of course, if you'd like any of that information, it's on the NIIM website, which is www.niim.com.au. It is time for the final question this evening, and a lot of the responses from our participants tonight in emails that came to us before were related to the question of resilience. I mean, I think it's fair to say that resilience is perhaps one of the most underrated and sort of underspoken values in both business and life, and indeed in our own personal health as well. Do you think the virus will change the way in which we behave, act, think moving forward? Perhaps making us more flexible and adaptive to changing circumstances in the future?
I think it will for some people. Like I'm saying, I think a lot of people will be thrown into crisis and out of crisis. There's opportunity. When you fall into chaos, you come out of it by reorganizing at a higher level. You don't come out at the same level you were previously. You come out of it reorganized at a higher level. So I think that we will see a lot of people coming out of this more resilient because they've had a look at these resources and they've realized they're available and that they can actually make those changes. So I'm reasonably optimistic. And those who don't, well, they need our help. They need us to be there for them.
I hate to be the kind of bearer of bad news, but I do think, and we've rightly referred to this bubble of isolation, I do think the more difficult times are ahead of us. Yeah. I think we're going to see changes in people's habits, in the way they spend, what they do. It'll affect industries, and unfortunately a lot of those industries are areas like hospitality, where a lot of those people are on minimum wages, and tourism as well. And so these are the kind of the less advantaged people here in Australia that unfortunately will see a wider gap. And I think that whilst the government have done an extraordinary job over this kind of 6-month period, once that support starts to dissipate, the banks, where they've been pausing on home loans and so forth, payments, all the reality will start to kick in, and that's when I think our resilience will be really tested. Yeah. We haven't really been hit hard like countries in Europe and the US, and so that's when our society's fabric will be tested. So it's really important to remind ourselves that we need to be in the best possible state to deal with what's ahead, because it will be challenging. It'll make us stronger, it'll make us better, but that's my hope. But it's definitely ahead of us.
Kathleen, did you want to find out?
No. I so agree with what Radek is saying. I think there are worse times in front still, and there will be parts of our society which their problems will deepen. And I hope that we're not just resilient, but we're compassionate as a country.
Exactly.
So there you have it. This has been a very challenging time for a lot of us, and whilst we've learned a lot about ourselves, it's now time to put those lessons in actions, come together and prepare for the road ahead. Thank you everyone for participating in tonight's webinar. And can also thank our brilliant panel of Dr. Chris Corcos, Kathleen Quealy from Quealy Winemakers, and Radek Sali from Light Warrior Group for their contribution and generous time spent with us tonight. Of course, this webinar tonight and all of the important work we do at NIIM, whether it's in our clinic, our education program, and indeed our groundbreaking research, is only made possible by generous supporters like yourself here. Again, if you are in a position to make a donation to NIIM, you are able to do so by going to our website and clicking on a link that will hit your inbox very soon. You can also become a friend of NIIM on our website and access those really important and relevant resources that have been spoken of this evening. Our clinic and dispensary is open at this time. You can book consultations, face-to-face consultations with our clinicians. If you would like more personalised integrative medical advice of the kind spoken about this evening, you can do so by calling our clinics here in Melbourne or on the Gold Coast. Thank you very much for your interest, support and participation tonight. Sorry we couldn't get to all questions. We look forward to welcoming you again here at NIIM, although over the internet, in the very near future. Thank you and good night.